It began as one of those days that seemed determined to unravel every small hope I had carefully tied together. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain but never quite delivered it, as if even the weather couldn't commit to mercy. I woke late, already behind on responsibilities I could barely manage even on good days. The electricity bill lay unpaid on the table, folded and unfolded so many times the edges had softened. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't have the courage to read. Life felt like a room slowly filling with water, and I was standing still, pretending I wasn't drowning. I left the house with no real destination in mind, just a need to move. Staying inside made the walls feel closer, as if they were conspiring to remind me of every failure. The street outside was alive with the usual noise. Vendors calling out prices, motorcycles weaving through traffic, children running to school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be, a purpose pulling them forward. I walked among them, invisible and unanchored. My plan, if it could be called that, was to visit the small office where I'd recently interviewed for a job. They hadn't called back, but I convinced myself that showing up might help. Maybe persistence would look like confidence instead of desperation. As I walked, I rehearsed what I'd say, trying to sound calm, capable, worthy. With each step, doubt whispered that I was fooling myself. Halfway there, my bus pass slipped from my pocket without me noticing. I only realized when I reached the stop and felt the empty space where it should have been. I searched my bag, then my pockets again, panic rising. That pass was my last credit for the month. Without it, I couldn't afford the fare, and walking the rest of the way would take hours. I retraced my steps, scanning the ground like a detective searching for clues. People passed me, some glancing briefly, others lost in their own worlds. Just as I was about to give up, a voice called out behind me. "Are you looking for this?" I turned to see a man holding up my bus pass between his fingers. He was probably in his late 50s, with kind eyes and hair graying at the temples. He wore simple clothes, slightly worn but clean, and there was something calm about the way he stood, as if time moved differently around him. "Yes," I said quickly, relief flooding my chest. "Thank you so much." I didn't even realize I'd dropped it. He handed it to me with a small smile. Happens more often than we think. Minds wander when hearts are heavy. The words caught me off guard. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Most people would have stopped at returning the pass and gone on their way. Instead, he lingered, as if he sensed the invisible weight I was carrying. "Where are you headed?" he asked gently. I hesitated. Something about his tone made honesty feel safe. "I'm going to check on a job interview," I said. "I'm not sure it will help." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. But showing up matters more than we realize." The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes, and passengers began to climb aboard. I thanked him again, ready to leave, but he surprised me by following me onto the bus. We ended up sitting across from each other, the city sliding past the windows in a blur of color and movement. For a few stops, we rode in silence. Then he spoke again. "I remember a day like the one you're having." I looked up, curious despite myself. "I was younger," he continued. "Everything I had planned fell apart. I lost my job, my savings, and not long after, my sense of direction. I thought it was the end of everything good in my life." "What happened?" I asked. He smiled softly. "A stranger helped me. Not with money or connections. Just with time." He listened. He reminded me that my worth didn't disappear just because my circumstances did. His words settled somewhere deep inside me, stirring emotions I'd been trying to bury. We talked for the rest of the ride, about work, about disappointment, about the quiet fear of feeling left behind. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were simple but thoughtful, like stones placed carefully across a river. When I reached my stop, I stood, unsure how to end the conversation. "Thank you," I said. "For everything." He stood as well. "Wait," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small folded paper and pressed it into my hand. "Open it later." Before I could ask what it was, he stepped back and took a seat again, giving me a nod that felt like both a goodbye and a blessing. The office visit went about as well as I'd feared. The receptionist was polite but distant, and the manager I hoped to see was in a meeting. I left with a forced smile and the familiar ache of rejection pressing against my ribs. Outside, the sky had darkened further, and a light drizzle began to fall. I walked to a nearby cafe, more for shelter than hunger. I ordered the cheapest tea and sat by the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. My thoughts returned to the stranger on the bus. His calm presence lingered with me, like a quiet melody that refused to fade. I remembered the folded paper in my pocket and pulled it out. Inside was a short note, written in neat, steady handwriting. "Today may feel heavy, but it is not empty. Keep going. You matter more than you know." Tucked behind the note was a small amount of cash, enough to cover a few meals, maybe a week of bus fares. My eyes burned as I stared at it. The gesture was so unexpected, so unnecessary, that it broke something open inside me. This man owed me nothing. He didn't know my full story, my mistakes, my fears. Yet he chose to help anyway. I sat there for a long time, letting the warmth of the tea and the weight of the moment sink in. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. The problems hadn't disappeared. The bills were still unpaid. The job was still uncertain. But the world felt less hostile, less indifferent. In the days that followed, I carried that note with me. Whenever doubt crept in, I unfolded it and read the words again. They reminded me that kindness could arrive without warning, wearing the face of a stranger on a bus. A week later, I received a call from the office. The position had opened unexpectedly, and they wanted to offer it to me. I laughed out loud after hanging up, a sound that felt foreign but welcome. My life didn't transform overnight, but that opportunity became a stepping stone, something solid beneath my feet. Months passed, and the memory of that day stayed with me. I often scanned faces on buses and sidewalks, half hoping to see him again so I could thank him properly. I never did. But in a way, he was always there, woven into my decisions, my outlook, my understanding of what it meant to be human. One evening, as I left work, I noticed a young woman sitting on the curb near the station, her face buried in her hands. People walked past her, eyes averted, just as they had walked past me on my worst days. I hesitated, feeling that familiar fear of getting involved, of not knowing what to say. Then I thought of the stranger who had seen me. I approached her slowly and asked if she was okay. She looked up, surprised, and shook her head. I sat beside her and listened as she spoke about missed opportunities, about feeling lost and alone in a city that never seemed to notice her. I didn't offer solutions. I didn't pretend to have answers. I just listened. Before I left, I gave her my bus pass for the week and wrote a short note on a scrap of paper. The words weren't as elegant as the ones I'd once received, but they were sincere. As I walked away, I felt a quiet sense of rightness settle over me. Kindness, I realized, is rarely loud or dramatic. It moves quietly, from one heart to another, changing lives in ways we may never fully see. That day, a stranger became a blessing to me. And because of him, I learned that we are all capable of becoming blessings too, simply by choosing to see each other, even on the heaviest of days.